At 87 years old, Jane Fonda finally breaks her silence about the man whose presence shaped some of the most defining chapters of her life and career, Robert Redford. Before those timeless moments on the screen, before the bond that would quietly strengthen over decades, there was simply a girl named Jane Seymour Fonda, born December 21st, 1937, in New York City. She entered this world surrounded by privilege, fame, and expectation. The daughter of legendary Hollywood icon Henry Fonda and socialite Francis Ford Seymour. Yet from the very beginning, Jane's life carried a shadow that even her family's prestige couldn't erase. Behind the glamorous facade of the Fonda name, something fragile, something wounded lived inside her. Tragedy has struck early. When Jane was just 12 years old, her mother took her own life. It became a wound that shaped her emotional world forever, the kind of scar that never fully fades. Even decades later, Jane would speak of that loss not as a memory, but as a presence, something that followed her into adulthood, into love, into her art, and into every moment she searched for purpose. Still, even in grief, she carried a spark, a restless, searching spirit that quietly pushed her toward discovery. Her education took her through prestigious schools like Emma Willard and Vassar College, but it wasn't until she lived in Paris and later trained under the legendary Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio that her path became clear. This was where she found her calling, where she found a voice that had long been buried beneath expectation and hurt, where she understood that she was meant not just to perform, but to express. In 1960, she stepped onto Broadway for the first time, and something shifted, something awakened. The world saw not just the daughter of Henry Fonda, but an actress with a fierce, undeniable presence, someone who was ready to carve out her own identity on her own terms. Jane's transition from a stage to screen happened quickly, almost as if destiny had been quietly waiting for her to step forward. Her early film roles, Tall Story 1960 and Cat Ballou 1965, revealed something unmistakable, a natural charisma, a spark that lit up the frame before she even spoke a word. But it wasn't just talent that drew audiences in, it was the way she carried emotion just beneath the surface, the way you could feel her inner world pulsing through every expression. By the late 1960s, she wasn't merely Henry Fonda's daughter anymore. She was Jane Fonda, Hollywood's new force. Her performance in Barefoot in the Park, 1967, showcased her comedic brilliance and emotional warmth, earning her both acclaim and admiration. But it was Barbarella, 1968, directed by her then-husband Roger Vadim, that changed everything. The film catapulted her into global stardom, turning her into an international sex symbol nearly overnight. Posters, magazine covers, billboards, her face, her image, her sensuality were everywhere. Yet beneath that glamorous veneer, Jane felt something very different. She later described the role as both a blessing and a burden. The film made her famous, but it also placed her inside a box she desperately longed to break out of. She didn't want to be adored only for beauty. She wanted to be respected for depth, intelligence, and truth. And soon, she would demand exactly that, from Hollywood and from herself. Because the 1970s weren't just a new decade for Jane Fonda, they were a turning point. A time when she stepped away from the shiny image crafted around her and leaned into the woman she truly was. Fierce, principled, and unafraid to challenge the world. The 1970s would become the decade that redefined Jane Fonda, not as a Hollywood star, but as a woman who refused to stay silent in a world full of injustice. Just as her acting career reached new heights, something deeper stirred within her, a pull toward activism, truth, and social change. Jane no longer wanted to be just the glamorous figure on posters. She wanted to stand for something real. And in doing so, she walked straight into the storm. She became one of the most outspoken voices against the Vietnam War, a passionate advocate for civil rights, and a fearless supporter of women's liberation. Her activism was bold, loud, unapologetic, and polarizing. Then came the moment that would shadow her life for decades. The infamous 1972 photograph in North Vietnam, the Hanoi Jane image. The controversy was explosive. Overnight, Jane became one of the most divisive figures in America. Many admired her courage, many condemned her, and the backlash followed her for years. But what people often forget is this: her actions were driven not by malice, but by a desperate hope to stop the suffering she saw. Later, Jane openly acknowledged the complexity of the situation, expressing regret for certain decisions while remaining steadfast in her belief in peace, justice, and human rights. Amid all the turmoil, something else was happening too, something extraordinary. Her art deepened. Her performances grew more layered, more raw, more fearless. Her roles in Clute, 1971, and Coming Home, 1978, earned her Academy Awards. In Clute, she portrayed a woman trapped between vulnerability and strength, delivering one of the most haunting performances of the decade. In Coming Home, her role mirrored her own awakening, a story of compassion for soldiers and the human cost of war. These films didn't just establish her as one of the greatest actresses of her generation. They revealed who Jane Fonda truly was, a woman unafraid to align her art with her convictions, even when the world turned against her. By the 1980s, Jane Fonda had already lived several lifetimes in one. She had been the ingenue, the sex symbol, the political firebrand, the award-winning actress, but now she was about to become something completely unexpected, a global fitness icon. In 1982, she released Jane Fonda's Workout, a simple home exercise video that would change not just her life, but an entire generation of women. The tape wasn't just successful, it was a revolution. Millions bought it, millions followed it, millions felt empowered by it. Jane wasn't preaching perfection. She was giving women permission to take control of their bodies, their health, and their confidence, no matter their age, their background, or their struggles. Her fitness empire exploded with tapes, books, merchandise, and worldwide recognition. And through it all, Jane stayed true to her message. Strength isn't just physical, it's emotional, it's spiritual, it's the resilience to reinvent yourself at any age. But reinvention didn't stop there. In the 2000s and 2010s, Jane experienced a breathtaking renaissance. She returned to acting with a fire that felt both familiar and entirely new. Her roles in Monster-in-Law, 2005, Youth, 2015, and especially the long-running Netflix hit Grace and Frankie, 2015 to 2022, introduced her to a brand new generation. Suddenly, teenagers, young adults, and families were discovering her brilliance, decades after her first rise to stardom. And off-screen, Jane's passion burned as fiercely as ever. She became a leading voice for climate action, human rights, and gender equality. In her 80s, she participated in Fire Drill Fridays, a series of climate protests in Washington, D.C. She was arrested multiple times, standing tall, unshaken, and absolutely fearless. Her message was clear: aging doesn't silence you. It empowers you. Jane Fonda was no longer just a Hollywood legend. She had become a symbol of strength, evolution, activism, and authenticity. Behind the fame, behind the awards, behind the activism, Jane Fonda's personal life unfolded with just as much intensity as her career. Her marriages, each one distinct, each one transformative, became chapters that reflected who she was at different moments in her evolution. Her first marriage in 1965 was to French director Roger Vadim. Vadim introduced her to a world bursting with European artistry, sensuality, and cinematic experimentation. He was charming, brilliant, provocative, and he shaped not only her early film persona, but her sense of global identity. Their relationship burned bright, sometimes too bright. It was passionate, glamorous, intoxicating, but also complicated. 8 years later, in 1973, the marriage ended, leaving Jane with lessons about independence, identity, and the price of becoming who the world expects you to be. That same year, she entered a new chapter, one defined not by glamour, but by purpose. Her second marriage to activist Tom Hayden was a different kind of partnership. It was built on shared convictions, political fire, and a belief that life should be lived in service to justice. For 17 years, they stood side by side, marching, protesting, raising their son, navigating the turbulence of public activism. But activism is demanding, and public pressure can strain even the strongest bonds. By 1990, the marriage dissolved, yet the influence remained. Hayden helped sharpen her social voice, deepen her empathy, and strengthen her sense of mission. Then came her third marriage in 1991 to media mogul Ted Turner, the billionaire founder of CNN. It was a union of two powerful, influential figures. With Turner, Jane stepped into a world of global philanthropy, business empires, and sweeping ambition. Their marriage lasted a decade, filled with grand gestures, profound differences, and the quiet tension that comes when two strong personalities try to share one life. By 2001, they separated. But even in this ending, Jane found clarity. She discovered her need for spiritual growth, for self-knowledge, for peace. Across all three marriages, Vadim, Hayden, Turner, Jane didn't just love. She learned, she grew, she evolved. Every relationship left its own mark, shaping the woman the world sees today. Wise, self-aware, and unafraid to own the complexity of her heart. And now we arrive at the moment the world has long wondered about, a truth Jane Fonda held close to her heart for decades, a story she never fully shared until now at 87 years old. As news of Robert Redford's passing rippled through Hollywood, tributes poured in from across the globe. But there was one voice people waited to hear, the voice of the woman who shared some of the most intimate, emotionally charged cinematic moments with him. When Jane finally spoke, her words were not rehearsed, polished, or distant. They were raw, soft, filled with the kind of emotion that only comes from a bond forged over a lifetime. She said, "Robert and I shared a bond that went beyond mere friendship. There was a deep, unspoken understanding between us." Those words revealed what many had always sensed, that behind the cameras, behind the timeless scenes, behind the easy laughter they shared during filming, there was something more. Not romance necessarily, but a connection, almost spiritual, woven through years of working together, trusting each other and witnessing each other's growth. Jane remembered the very first time she met Redford. He carried this rare combination of humility and quiet confidence, she said. He made you feel seen, He made you feel safe. To Jane, Redford was more than a co-star. He was a grounding presence, calm, steady, and deeply respectful. Someone who listened, someone who noticed the little things, someone who made you believe that your voice mattered. And in Hollywood, a place full of noise, ego, and illusion, that kind of presence is rare, precious, unforgettable. Sheila spoke of their creative synergy, a chemistry so natural that audiences felt it without needing to understand it. Working with Robert elevated my craft, she explained. He pushed me to go deeper, always without diminishing me. This wasn't just admiration, it was gratitude, the kind that stays with a person for a lifetime. Beyond acting, Jane also highlighted Redford's kindness, his loyalty, and his quiet dedication to social and environmental causes. He didn't just talk about making a difference, she said. He lived it. And then came the most heartbreaking part, her acknowledgement of the void his passing left behind. Losing Robert is like losing a piece of the foundation of what we built together in Hollywood, Jane whispered. His spirit, his honesty, his gentleness, they will stay with me always. At 87, Jane Fonda didn't just pay tribute to a colleague, she opened a window into the most profound connection of her artistic life, one built on respect, trust, and a shared search for truth in their craft. In the end, Jane Fonda's story is not simply the tale of a Hollywood legend. It is the journey of a woman who dared to confront every chapter of her life, the triumphs, the controversies, the heartbreaks, the reinventions, with honesty, courage, and a relentless hunger for meaning. From the pain of her childhood to the fire of her activism, from her extraordinary career to the intimate bond she shared with Robert Redford, Jane stands today as a testament to the power of resilience. At 87, she speaks not as the icon the world sees, but as a human being who has loved deeply, lost painfully, fought fiercely, and lived authentically. Her reflections on Robert Redford remind us of something timeless, that the most profound connections in life don't always need explanation. Some bonds are carved quietly, in trust, in respect, in shared dreams, and in the spaces between words. As we look back on her life and forward to the legacy she continues to build, one truth becomes clear. Jane Fonda has never stopped growing, never stopped questioning, never stopped fighting, and she has never stopped inspiring the world. If her story teaches us anything, it is this. It is never too late to speak your truth, never too late to evolve, never too late to honor the people who shaped your journey. And as Jane herself steps into the twilight of her extraordinary life, her voice, steady, thoughtful, filled with wisdom, remains a guiding light for anyone who has ever dared to start over.